on our latest production, we did a multicam studio shoot, and it just so happened that we filmed a band in the studio, and we had to really kind of consider the kind of implications of copyright. And you'll probably want to talk a bit more about
when we started, we thought that the tracks were old enough to be out of copyright. These are early 1920 songs that the band were performing. And it wasn't until we actually shot it and then started to look into it, we realised, I forget how we discovered it, but basically that the copyright issue really cropped up because copyright to music doesn't run out until 70 years past the death of the composer. And the two composers of the two songs that we'd recorded lived to be very ancient, so they don't fall out. Their music doesn't fall out of copyright for another 15 years. So we were definitely caught out by that, and then we had to investigate how we could use these material for our 3D video, and that involved us in a whole heap of background research to try and find out who the copyright holders were. And we just began to research this and found that each of the songs was written by a different composer, and one of the songs had a different lyricist. So we had to then track down who controlled the rights to the words and music for those songs. And that was not at all straightforward. One of the issues is that the original, when the composer composed the song, it would be registered with a publisher who got it published. The publisher then controls the rights. But that was a publisher in the 1920s in New York. Subsequently, they got taken over at least 2 or 3 times by larger publishing houses, so that the current controller of those rights is 3 generations away from the original publisher. And you've got to track all this down to try and find out who is the current rights holder, and it's not at all straightforward.
And there's the other added thing, isn't there, that with the actual publisher itself, they will separate the rights off. So, for example, 10% of the world rights could be owned by one publisher, and then 80% of the Commonwealth could be owned by another publisher. So, in that sense,
the world rights are divided down. So there's US rights, there's Commonwealth rights, there's UK rights, there's rights for different parts of the world. Since we wanted to have the ability to put our film out on, put it up for film festivals across the world, we needed to have rights that were worldwide rights to use the material. So this is not down to, even in modern day, it's not down to who writes the song, it's about who published the song. It's the publisher who controls the rights, not the writer of the song. And you have to negotiate with them.
Do you want me to add a bit more? Yeah, when it comes to actually negotiating the rate, the way that it works is that the publisher will be in liaison with the estate, and they will discuss, how much they want to set as a rate, whether it's commercial, whether it's educational, and they'll set a rate. And then how it works is that if there is different publishers that own different parts of the world, they'll all agree an amount, and that amount will be the largest. So, for example, if say if US owns 50% and they decide they want a certain amount of money for you to have the license, then the others will go to that amount if they've set a smaller amount. So then once that's been figured out, then everyone gets a percentage of what they own of the rights.
So there's one amount of money you pay, but the percentages gets divvied up by the different publishers. But you have to negotiate with all of them.
Yeah.
So you negotiate with all of the publishers, because what you're trying to do is, we actually had quite an active negotiation, because we kind of kept pushing them for, like, they would offer, say, 1 year's rights, and we would say, well, can't we have it for 2 years? Because the other publisher offered it, say, for 2 years for the other song that we were doing. So we ended up kind of having some element of negotiation, but it is a commercial negotiation you're undertaking. It's something I just hadn't really expected at all. And there's no altruism out there. They're there to make money. And there was no truck on us being educational, really, because they've got to make their money, and you're employing them for their time. They've got to produce contracts. You end up with a contract from each publisher. The actual documentation has to be produced that says what rights you have, the name of the song, the publisher, the lyricist, and the details of those rights. So you have to accept a contract. There's a different one from each publisher, and then you have to pay across the money, and that's just the way it is.
Should we explain a bit about the video, the fact that they were performing the video, and that they hadn't written the track?
Yeah, so if you're dealing with with musicians who are performing their own songs, then that's much more straightforward. We were dealing with a band who were performing somebody else's work. So obviously the first element is getting the permission of the band to use their performance. Well, that's fine because you're doing a video of them. But in theory, you need that permission as well as the permission for the writer of the song that they are performing. In most environments, this is something you don't normally come upon. For example, if bands are playing in pubs or smaller venues, then on the whole, those venues have blanket licenses that allow them to engage bands who perform covers, perform other people's work, without all this individual negotiation, which would just stop that industry dead. But when we are dealing with it from a point of view of video, it's not about performing in a public space, it's about videoing a performance. The rights all jump up then, and they start off assuming that you're basically a broadcaster wanted to broadcast content, and you have to you're negotiating down from that, saying, no, actually it's for film festivals, this isn't for broadcast rights, it's for showing in a limited audience space, but we did want YouTube. And so again, we negotiated that we could put the song up on YouTube, which means it's available worldwide, not just for the film festival audience that would be seeing it on the day it was shown. And that was, again, this is all part of what you want to be able to do with the rights, be able to do with the song. You can't, and you have to be upfront. You can't possibly do anything that is wrong. You can't abuse your rights because you might want some more rights in the future, and it's a small world that they all live in, and you don't want to be black-marked. So you've got to be upfront and honest about what you want to do, and then you can negotiate from that point.
If you were in a similar situation, how would you adjust the project objectives in order to?
I mean, upon reflection, I mean, I think I have no regrets doing it in that order. Because I think sometimes, I think it's great to use commercial music, because commercial music, when you include it in a product, it can really add something really special. And you only need to look at features and films that use commercial and good commercial music, or commercial music that really adds something. And I think the pros really outweigh the the flip side of it. I think if we'd really considered how long the copyright would have taken us, which probably about 8 months all in all, if we'd really have taken that on board from the outset, we probably wouldn't have done it. So the flip side of kind of doing things on the hoof or on the hoof and worrying about it later is it means that you actually do it, And again, I think if you think too much about things, you just won't do it. However, so if I was to do this again, I probably wouldn't do it any differently. I think we both realised that actually it wasn't going to be plain sailing, no matter what happened. But I think, an alternative way of approaching this would be that you pick songs that are out of copyright. But again, that would have meant going to tracks that were in the 1900s.
Your creative decision, aren't you?
And that just wasn't viable, really. What a lot of people do instead is that, again, in our case, it was a live multicam performance in a studio of a band. But what a lot of people who make short films or documentaries, what they'll do is they'll create a kind of temp track of what they're kind of wanting to use, or a commercial track, but then they'll get a composer in place to actually compose the music, so that they operate outside, or that they have separate negotiations with people and don't go down the lengthy route of getting the license for a commercial track. But again, that is an alternative. But I think it's great to get engaged with this kind of with copyright.
Certainly an experience, I mean, I think an eye-opener, but that doesn't mean to say that we wouldn't use commercial music again. You just have to be prepared, I think, for that kind of... I wasn't really prepared for it. I mean, I have to say, I thought it would, even when we started out, I thought it was relatively easy. Oh, you know, we're an educational establishment, it's an educational project, and you just get this wall, you know, oh no, you have to get... And there's an expectation that you are fully aware of what you're doing. They don't kind of...
They don't want to explain the process.
No, they don't want to explain
really
the process
don't want
at
to
all.
get,
They just want to get on with it, bang, you know. Yeah. So I wouldn't be put off it, but just be prepared.
I think also be prepared that it takes a
long
while as well. So if you've got to turn a project around in a month and you want to get the permission, unless you've got a kind of production company behind you that's doing this kind of thing day in, day out, and they've got the connections.
Well, you can have there are agents who do this, sort of clearance
Yeah.
agents, so you could go and, but that's going to cost money, and then they'll do the clearance for you.
Yeah.
And because they're known to the publishers, it must be a much more efficient process. We were learning as we were going along, which is obviously going to slow things down.
But that would definitely be a good route to take. Yeah.